There is no one answer to why a franchise grows. But what I think anybody getting into this business should be looking at is how innovative and proactive is the franchise in recognizing new and untapped opportunities and being responsive to what's happening in the market.
Welcome to the I Fired My Boss franchise podcast. My name's Dan Claps, founder and CEO of Franchise Playbook, a franchisor platform where we create, own, and operate dynamic franchise brands in the mobile services space. And my life's goal is to help people just like you fire their boss and become a business owner.
And I'm Christian Dadalak, top franchise consultant and co-founder of Real Franchising, a leading franchise consulting firm. And together, we're on a mission to help people fire their boss, hire themselves, and live the American dream through franchise ownership.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the I Fired My Boss podcast. I'm super excited for our guest that we've got here, Jason Feifer. You know, if you've listened to this podcast, before we jump in, I would like to ask you to please go to the subscribe button, hit the 5 stars. I think we're coming up on almost 150 episodes out. So want to continue putting this out. The more that you help us with likes and subscribes would be great. But let's jump right into it. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you've listened to our podcast, I always like to have our guests kind of go through their background. I think you could tell your story a bit better than mine. For anyone listening, I follow Jason on Instagram. He's always putting out great content around brand, and I find myself reposting it often. So, Jason, let's jump into, how did you get your start and what's your story?
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me. Thanks for following me on Instagram. Well, I'll tell you my story from the perspective of I fired my boss because I have in some way or another been trying to build a career that claws back autonomy and control that, people don't generally find and feel when they're not their own boss. The irony of it is that I speak to you today as the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, not the boss. I mean, boss in some way, but I don't own the company. But I have found this pathway in which I am straddling these two lines of producing something that I really care about and that I have a lot of autonomy in building, that I am the boss in many ways on, and then also building a lot of my own things. So in real brief, I graduated college, I became a community newspaper reporter, and I wanted to work at the biggest publications possible, and I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know how to get there. And the one revelation that I had while I was at that little newspaper, Gardner News, circulation 6,000, North Central Massachusetts, 2002 is when this is happening. I'm getting paid $20,000 a year to be there. And what I realized was I was sitting around waiting for someone at the New York Times or whatever to recognize my genius and to hire me. And that was not going to happen. Of course, that was not going to happen. I needed to go to them. I couldn't sit around and wait for people to come to me. So I quit that job and I had asked myself 3 questions, not as intentionally as I can articulate them right now, but I'd really asked myself 3 questions. What do I have? What do I need? What's available? What do I have? What do I need? What's available? What do I have? At that time, what I had was a job that paid me a meager salary and that gave me at least some experience in doing the kind of work that I wanted to do. What do I need? Well, if I want to work at the best publications, if I want to eventually do something of my own, well, then I need experience and I need to be able to prove to people that I can work at their level, which is considerably higher than where I am as a college grad at a tiny newspaper. So I need experience, I need people to believe in me, and I need proof. What's available? The most important question you can ask, what's available? Available doesn't mean available in 20 years. It doesn't mean available if the right conditions exist. It just means available. What do you have within reach that you can do something about? And for me, that was quitting my job and freelancing, because in my industry, you can either work for a publication or you can freelance for a publication. You can basically be an independent contractor coming up with individual story ideas and pitching them. And so that's what I did. I quit my $20,000 job, and I sat in my dumpy apartment that cost me $500 a month next to a graveyard in rural Massachusetts, and I just started cold pitching. And after a lot of time, I started to develop a freelance career, writing for the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Associated Press. And that led me back into media. I eventually became a magazine editor at Boston Magazine, moved to New York for Men's Health, went to Fast Company, bounced around, became editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine in 2016, and continued to basically do that. I pursue so many projects that nobody asks me to do, but that I just think are growth opportunities because they are available to me. I have started my own media company. I've started a coaching business for consumer packaged goods founders. I travel and speak a lot and have built a portfolio career that makes me really happy. And I think that when I apply all this to the listeners here, and you have asked yourself, what is available? Well, I think the answer is well, clearly, if you've come here, the answer is franchising. Franchising is available. It's available at endless different levels of access and financing, and skills and abilities, and I think not enough people ask themselves what is available and get creative about that answer. They think that what's available has to be something in front of their noses that somebody else has set them up for, but that's not true. What's available is what you proactively put yourself in front of to create opportunities for yourself.
That's excellent. So it's so interesting. I think about, when people's careers, how they snowball pretty quickly, right? You start out in, modest way and you work hard. And then what I found is once you start to hit a certain level of success, that can compound pretty fast. It sounds like your story was the same thing, especially, did you say in 2016 is when you became editor-in-chief?
Yeah. I got to Entrepreneur in 2015 as the executive editor, and I became editor-in-chief in 2016. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, that's fantastic. So I guess, one of my questions would be, Entrepreneur does a phenomenal job at putting out content on business ownership. Obviously getting, ranked in your publications is fantastic. I guess my question would be, you've seen a lot of different franchises and within your magazine since 2016. A lot of our listeners, Jason, they're looking into owning a business. They're looking at becoming an entrepreneur as a franchise owner. Given all your experience in putting articles together and overseeing everything, like what would you say is the number one thing you've seen really allows a franchise to win these awards and be so considered a strong franchise? And maybe there's one that won the award in 2016 or 17, and then you just see it continuing from a support standpoint being strong. Is there any trend you've seen from whether it's an emerging brand or more established brand that really helps them win? And end up on the franchise 500?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways to answer that. I mean, the most important thing that any brand, any company can do, whether they're a franchise or not, obviously, is to be adaptable to the moment, to recognize that what works today is not going to work tomorrow, to be willing to pivot, adapt, understand consumers' new needs, all that good stuff. And I mean, the oldest brand on the Franchise 500. So the Franchise 500, for those who don't know, is we've been doing it for 46 years. It is the definitive ranking of the strongest franchise brands. And to do that, we gather a mountain of data on as many franchises as will give it to us. More than 1,000, considerably more than 1,000 apply, and then we process that data. We look at 150 different data points, and then we kind of process it algorithmically based on how we feel like that data should be weighed to recognize strength of business and brand, it's quite an undertaking. It takes 6 months of data crunching. You cannot buy your way onto this ranking. It is purely the data, and what we see across time is, brands that thrive are brands that are constantly rethinking their process, their leadership, their franchise support, the products and services that they offer to customers, and the ones that stay on top are the ones that are always inventing. We do this thing every year that we call the big movers. Well, I guess it's funny. We call it internally the big movers. I don't know that language ever shows up in the magazine, but what the big movers is we will zoom in on a couple brands that had significant jumps in the list from year to year. Sometimes they didn't make the list the previous year, and then they showed up really strong on the list this year. Sometimes they were low on the list, and then they jumped. And we want to know what they did. Like what happened in the past year. And the answer is really interesting. It's different for every brand. But I'm just gonna grab because you and I are talking actually before the Franchise 500 for 2025 has been published, so I don't have it in front of me. But I'll tell you some stories from the 2024 list. So there's a brand called Zoom Room that in 2024 jumped 189 spots. And how did it do that? Well, how it did that was that the new CEO was looking at this brand and it did not like what he saw. He thought that they were selling units, but those units weren't growing the way that they should. So I'm just going to read from it. So his first act, this would be the new CEO, his first act was to implement a 2-year moratorium on sales of new franchise locations. He used the hiatus to build out the support team, bring on a VC partner, and improve unit economics. And there's like stories like that throughout where sometimes it's not something as drastic as hitting pause on growth and then restructuring the foundation of the business. Sometimes it's just simply a matter of rethinking marketing or of discovering that you can partner with other brands and refer customers. There's all sorts of really, really cool stories in here where we see. I'm trying to find another one that I can give you. Oh, here's a good one. So Donut NV. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that name. Donut. Well, it's Donut NV, which you're supposed to pronounce like envy.
Yeah, I always thought of it donut envy, like you envy the donut, right? Yeah,
exactly. Although I have to say, had they come to me with that name and they said, "What do you think?" I would think that everyone is going to think that this is a donut brand based in Nevada. That's what I always think when I see it.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, so something that Donut Envy did was they brought their mobile operation. Let's see, they brought their like trailer operation. So the Donut Envy is a mobile donut franchise, and they brought their trailer production in house so that they were able to produce the trailers that the franchisees sell their donuts out of, like at a much faster clip, and by rethinking their manufacturing and then being able to very quickly take feedback and apply it to their manufacturing, they were able to increase the efficiency of producing these trailers that then got into franchisees' hands much faster and were much better products because they were able to innovate much faster. And that by itself drove tremendous growth. So, I like the very short version of my long-winded answer here is there is no one answer to why a franchise grows. But what I think anybody getting into this business should be looking at is how innovative and proactive is the franchise in recognizing new and untapped opportunities and being responsive to what's happening in the market.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to me, I think franchise is growing, yes, there are times where the franchisors, great at promoting their brand, and then maybe they're growing for that reason, but that doesn't last very long, right? Because it's a product that people are buying that they have to have a result, right? If the franchise owner isn't happy and making money, then eventually that'll come out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so when I think about a brand that sustainably for a long period of time is growing, it's a testament to that the validation of the franchise owners is strong. And, there's a reason that they continue to grow the way that they are, especially again, if that's over many years of time.
Yeah, that's right. And it's worth digging in and understanding. I mean, be the reporter. When we want to understand what a brand is doing. We just call up and we start asking some direct questions, like what did you do in the last year that drove these changes? People tell you really, really interesting things. I also really find it helpful to ask franchises about the market conditions that they operate in, to hear them articulate where they see opportunity. I remember we had a reporter recently talk to, I'm blanking on the name now, but they're leader in the hydraulic hose service industry. ServPro, did they do that? Gosh, I hope I'm right about that. And anyway, it was really interesting to hear, so why is there growth in hydraulic hose services? You hear the most interesting things. You hear, there's industries that focus on heavy machinery, particularly this one, and this one, are growing at this clip. And even though there's been a lot of talk about electric heavy machinery, people are still preferencing hydraulic because of this and this reason. And so as these industries are growing, which they are now because of economic conditions and the increased reliance upon hydraulic despite electrification, that's leading to more hydraulic hose need, and therefore need to repair these hydraulic hoses. And also because these industries are working on very tight deadlines and they cannot have these machines being down for long, we've built all these additional services like 24/7 repair and kind of proactive maintenance, so these things don't shut down in the first place. Like that to me is the level of detail that I always want to hear as a reporter talking. I want to make sure that you can really articulate what is happening outside of your business in the economy that drives your business, so that you're seeing where opportunity is, and also you're seeing where you need to be adapting your services to match the evolving needs of your consumer. If you can hear somebody articulate that really, really clearly, you can get a really good sense of what opportunity looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, to me, just one more topic on this conversation. I mean, to me, what I've learned being a franchisor is I think the best franchisors have really an adept ability to listen to their franchise owners in a methodical way. Obviously, the larger, like for us, we have 75 owners, which is not by any means huge, but we're starting to be a certain scale, and obviously you can only get so much feedback individually, one-to-one. And so, utilizing surveys and utilize like the franchise business review and utilizing, different ways of receiving feedback is so important. But I think what you said about always innovating, I mean, that's the job of the franchisor, right? Is to come up with new ideas so that the franchise owner can execute. If you're not innovating, then, and Jason, I'll say something else on this. I was having this conversation last night with someone. You have to, as a franchisor, never forget that they're paying you a royalty. They're paying you a good amount of money. And if a franchise owner feels like, every year, what have you done for me lately? I think they have the right to feel that way because they're paying you every year. And so I think if you're not innovating and working to earn that royalty every single year, you're gonna absolutely create disalignment within your system.
Yeah, that's right. First of all, I'm gonna run the correction on myself before somebody sends me a nasty email. The hydraulic hose services company I was talking about is Pirtek, Pirtek.
Pirtek, yeah.
And so apologies for I think I said ServPro. So Pirtek was that, and they showed up in the 2025 issue. We ran a little piece about them explaining the growth in hydraulic hose services. So that's where that had come from. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Look, but it should also be a dialogue, because what I often hear from franchises is that a lot of the innovation comes from listening to franchisees. They're the ones on the ground. They're the ones serving the end customer. And they often have fantastic ideas that they've either piloted in some very small way at their own unit, depending on the flexibility that an individual franchise has, or just ideas that they think should be implemented. And there's a long list. Perhaps you can rattle some of these off if you know what I'm talking about. Like there's a long list of some of the most classic things in franchise, at franchise brands, some of the most classic food at McDonald's or Taco Bell, like actually came out of the head of a franchisee who then shared it with the franchisor who loved it, tested it, and then rolled it out system wide. So you should absolutely be expecting smart, agile innovation from your franchisor. You should also, I think, be expecting the franchisor to have ears open and be open to that dialogue, because sometimes the greatest innovations happen from the franchisee. Taco Bell is actually a great example of this. They're in constant dialogue with their franchisees and are routinely taking ideas from them and then implementing them system wide. And actually, I just recently talked to Sean Tresvant, who's the CEO over there. He just completed his first year as CEO. And he spent some time working at a local Taco Bell because he wanted to understand things from the frontline and from the franchisor perspective. And now he has told his executive team that everyone is going to work a day at a Taco Bell every quarter because it's so important to be on the ground and seeing that experience and having that dialogue. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, it's interesting. So now, but I think when you're in the franchise industry, like myself, you're always thinking of Entrepreneur Magazine on that discipline or that vehicle. Obviously, the magazine is centered around entrepreneurship in general. But I was curious, as far as in the franchise industry, this is something I've been in franchising since 2014, and I feel like, and I was in my early 20s, and I used to go to IFA and different events, and I remember being at entrepreneurs' parties, and then but not parties, but you know what I mean, get-togethers, networking events.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit of a party, and
sure.
And I was curious, like, so for me, it's 10 years at least that I've known of entrepreneur in franchising. But when did that start?
Oh boy, I couldn't give you exact dates, but here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that Entrepreneur has been publishing the Franchise 500 for 46 years. So the brand has been around, as long as that, if not a little bit longer. The story, as I know it, really picks up with there was the brand. Oh, this could have been in the 70s or 80s. I don't know. Somebody's going to have to correct me. I had I known you were going to ask that, I would have looked up the exact answer. But it was the brand was heavily focused on franchise, but was really struggling. And one of their advertisers, who was a franchisor, whose name was Peter Shea, had seen a lot of success advertising in Entrepreneur. And when he heard that the brand was near bankruptcy, he put together, I think, a group of buyers and bought it and then revived it and turned it into the thriving brand that it became. We wouldn't be sitting here talking if it wasn't for Peter. And Peter grew the brand and then retired and passed it along to his son, Ryan Shea. And Ryan is the current CEO and owner of this brand. So not only has franchising been a part of this brand since the very beginning, but it was saved by someone in franchising who was just an advertiser and came along and purchased the brand. So we think of franchising as absolutely core to what we're doing, at Entrepreneur. Indeed, the brand serves everybody who identifies as entrepreneurs, franchisees and franchisors among them, but not exclusively to. But we do devote a section in the magazine every issue to franchising. The January issue is always the Franchise 500. It's massive,
right?
And we publish a ton of content online all the time about franchising.
Excellent. Well, Jason, I don't want to keep you. If someone wants to, maybe not get in touch with you, or at least keep following that content that I'm always seeing, where do you put most of your content? Is it Instagram? I know that's where I see your stuff, but is it mostly there? Is it LinkedIn? Is it across the board?
Oh, well, if it's me you're talking about, I'm pretty active, mostly on LinkedIn, actually, secondarily on Instagram, but you could certainly find me at any of those places. I also, I write a newsletter called One Thing Better. Each week, one way to be more successful and satisfied at work and build a career or company that you love. You can find that at onethingbetter.email, which is a web address. Just plug that into a browser, onethingbetter.email. And then for entrepreneur stuff, well, entrepreneur.com is the best place to start, or just go to your local newsstand and grab Entrepreneur Magazine. And if you're listening to this at the very beginning of the year, then we would have just dropped the Franchise 500 for 2025. You should definitely check that out. And you can do that again on newsstands, or you could just go to entrepreneur.com/franchise 500.
Excellent. I know I'll be getting my copy. This is probably going to launch. You're listening now. It is the new year. Go out and grab a copy. Check it out. And I really thank everyone again for listening into the I Fired My Boss podcast. Please do hit the like, subscribe button. Help us get to that 200th episode. We've got to continue growing on the platforms. Jason, thanks again.
Hey, thank you. And congratulations on 150 or so episodes, and keep it rocking.
You're f***ing fired.
If you want to say those words to your boss, make sure you head on over to ifiredmybosspodcast.com and fill out the form to schedule a no-cost consultation. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend who might also want to fire their boss.